sat across from the man I once married and the lawyer I'd paid to protect me. The conference room felt smaller than it should have, the air thick with something I couldn't name yet. Mr. Alden slid papers across the polished table, his tone smooth and rehearsed. "Harper, this is standard procedure in divorces like yours. We're just finalizing the property division." I scanned the documents, my eyes catching on one particular line. The title of my home, my grandmother's home, the house that had been in my family for 40 years, was being transferred to him. My ex-husband smirked from across the table, tapping his expensive pen against the wood. That sound, tap, 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 made my stomach drop. "Are you two working together?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them, barely above a whisper. Alden's professional smile faltered for just a second. My ex shifted in his chair. I leaned back slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. Then I spoke again, my voice soft but steady. "You might want to check your recording policy before I sign anything." The color drained from Alden's face. My ex stopped tapping his pen. "My name is Harper, and I used to believe justice was simple. I thought lawyers protected people, that the system worked, that truth mattered more than connections. I was wrong about all of it, but I learned. 6 months earlier, I'd been a different person entirely." I remember sobbing in my car outside the courthouse, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I'd just found out my husband had been cheating with his assistant for over a year. Everyone at his office knew. His friends knew. I was the only fool who hadn't seen it coming. That's when Mr. Alden approached my car window. He was older, distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed upset," he said gently. "I'm an attorney. If you need representation, I'd be happy to help. We'll make sure you're protected." His kindness felt like a lifeline. I took his card with trembling fingers. Later that day, I saw my ex hugging that same assistant in the parking lot. And there was Alden, standing near his car, watching them with an expression I couldn't quite read. Our first official meeting happened in Alden's downtown office, all dark wood and leather chairs. He poured me coffee and listened to my story with concerned nods. When I finished, he leaned forward with clasped hands. "Harper, we need to move quickly on the assets. I suggest selling the house for a clean division. Your husband seems like a reasonable man. We can work with him." Something twisted in my gut. Reasonable? The man who'd lied to me for a year. But Alden had come recommended by someone at my ex's company. He had stellar reviews online. Surely he knew what he was doing. "The house was my grandmother's," I said quietly. "It's been in my family since before I was born." "I understand the emotional attachment," Alden replied smoothly. "But emotionally is exactly why we need to be strategic. Trust me on this." I nodded, ignoring the tight feeling in my chest. That night, I drove past my ex's new apartment to drop off some mail. Alden's silver BMW was parked right outside, at 9 o'clock at night. A week later, Alden called me in for another meeting. His assistant brought us water, and he shuffled through files with a concerned expression. "Harper, I have some unfortunate news. It seems we've misplaced your copy of the prenuptial agreement, the one that outlines the house ownership." My heart stopped. Misplaced? How do you misplace something that important? "These things happen in transitions," he said calmly. "But don't worry, we'll recreate it from memory. You said it clearly states the house remains yours, correct?" "Yes, completely separate property. My grandmother deeded it to me before she died." "Perfect. We'll work from that." Something in his tone made my skin crawl, the way he said perfect a little too quickly. I left his office feeling dizzy. In the parking garage, I called the original lawyer who drafted the prenup. He was retired but remembered me. "I can send you my copy," he said. "I keep everything backed up." Later that day, while waiting at a coffee shop, I saw Alden through the window. He was on his phone, laughing. Then I heard him clearly say my ex's name. I couldn't sleep that night. Every conversation with Alden replayed in my mind, each one taking on a different shade now. The way he'd rushed certain decisions. How quickly he'd suggested selling my grandmother's house. his insistence that my ex was reasonable despite all evidence to the contrary. The next morning, I walked into an electronics store and bought the smallest voice recorder they had. It was barely bigger than a USB drive. The clerk showed me how to use it, how it could record for hours on a single charge. "Is this for lectures?" she asked. "Something like that," I replied. At my next meeting with Alden, I kept the recorder in my purse, red light blinking through the fabric. He poured me coffee again, overly polite, smiling too much. "I've been thinking about your situation, Harper. What if we proposed joint ownership of the house? Just temporarily until the divorce finalizes." "But it's my house," I said carefully. "The prenup." Yes, but courts like compromise. It shows good faith." He leaned closer. "Once the sale clears, we'll be in the clear." He'd said we. My hand tightened around my coffee cup. I spent the entire drive home playing his words over in my mind. Once the sale clears, we'll be in the clear. Why would my lawyer use "we" when talking about my ex and the house sale, unless he wasn't just my lawyer anymore? When I got home, I locked every door and window. Then I sat at my kitchen table and played back the recording. The sound quality was better than I'd hoped, crystal clear. I could hear Alden's voice, every word, every pause. Then I heard something I'd missed during the meeting. After I'd left to use the restroom, Alden had made a phone call. "She's easy to steer," he'd said to someone. "The emotional ones always are. Just keep playing the victim, she'll cave." The voice that responded was my ex-husband's. My hands shook as I stopped the playback. I had proof, actual proof of collusion. But I couldn't expose them yet, not before I understood the full scope of what they were planning. If I revealed what I knew too soon, they'd just find another way. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to let them think they were winning. 2 days later, my ex called. His voice was different, softer, almost sad. "Harper, I know things have been awful between us. I was thinking maybe we could talk things out, just the two of us. There's a restaurant downtown, neutral territory." Every instinct screamed it was a trap, but I agreed. The restaurant was quiet and expensive. My ex arrived first, then Alden walked in 10 minutes later, acting surprised to see us both. "What a coincidence," he said, sliding into our booth uninvited. They worked as a team, finishing each other's sentences, urging me to sign a temporary property document. "Just so we can move forward," my ex said. "Show the court we're cooperating." I pretended to drink more wine than I actually did, slurring my words slightly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm being difficult." They exchanged a quick glance. I signed the document they'd brought, using the pen my ex offered. What they didn't notice was how I switched out the real papers for blank ones while pretending to fumble with my purse. The actual document they wanted signed stayed safely in my bag. In the parking lot, alone, I allowed myself one small smile. I now had proof of fraud. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. My ex started calling our mutual friends, painting me as unstable. "She's obsessed," he told anyone who'd listen. "She won't let go. She's making up stories about her own lawyer." When I tried to email Alden with questions about the case, he ignored me for days. When he finally responded, his messages were short and dismissive. The man who'd been so attentive before was suddenly too busy for basic updates. I started keeping a notebook, writing down everything. Dates, times, exact phrases from conversations. I photographed every document, backed up every email. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. One afternoon, I went to the courthouse to file some routine paperwork. A clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, processed my forms. As she handed them back, she leaned closer and spoke quietly. "Be careful with your lawyer. I've seen him meeting with your ex-husband 3 times in the last month, off-record meetings in the parking lot." My blood ran cold. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded once, then called the next person in line. The next court document I received felt like a punch to the stomach. It listed my detailed financial information, bank accounts I'd never disclosed publicly, investment details I'd only shared with Alden under attorney-client privilege. And now my ex's lawyer was using every single detail against me, painting me as someone hiding assets. I called Alden immediately. How did they get my financial information? Harper, he sighed, sounding tired and annoyed. You're being emotional. This happens in divorces. Information gets shared during discovery. It's completely normal. But I never disclosed those accounts in any official filing. You must have forgotten. The stress is getting to you. His voice dropped, becoming almost gentle. This is why you need to trust me. You're not thinking clearly. He was gaslighting me. Actually gaslighting me about information he'd leaked himself. You're right, I said quietly. I'm sorry, I'm just scared. I understand. Try to get some rest. After I hung up, I looked at my phone for a long moment. Then I played back the recording I'd made of our conversation. And there it was, a moment I'd heard but not consciously registered. After I apologized, there was a sound. Quiet but unmistakable. Alden had smirked. I could hear it in the tiny exhale through his nose, the shift in his breathing. I needed more. The recordings I had were damning, but I needed something explicit, something undeniable. So I set up another meeting, this time inviting Alden for coffee at a quiet cafe. I played my role perfectly, nervous woman on the edge of giving up. My hands trembled as I stirred sugar into my coffee. Mr. Alden, I've been thinking, what if I just let him have the house? Maybe that would make all of this stop. I watched his face carefully. Relief washed over his features, followed by something that looked almost like greed. Harper, that's actually the smart move, he said, leaning back in his chair. I've been hoping you'd come to this conclusion. Sometimes the fight isn't worth it. You really think so? Absolutely. He paused, then added something I'd been hopping for. Don't worry, once the transfer goes through, he'll compensate me for my time. This has been a tricky case, but we're almost done. My hand shook as I reached for my purse strap, adjusting it slightly. Inside, my recorder blinked red. He just admitted to a payment arrangement with my ex-husband, a direct violation of legal ethics. Thank you for being patient with me, I said softly. That's what I'm here for. I started playing a different game after that. I called my ex and told him, through tears, that I was running out of money. The legal fees were crushing me. I didn't know how I'd pay next month's bills. It wasn't entirely a lie. Divorce was expensive. But I had savings he didn't know about, money my grandmother had left me in a separate account. My ex panicked exactly as I'd hoped. He called Alden multiple times. I knew because Alden slipped and mentioned it during our next phone call. They needed to finish the property transfer quickly before I went completely broke and became worthless to them. They moved fast, too fast. Documents started flying back and forth. Alden sent me paperwork to sign, always with urgent deadlines. We need this by Friday. The court needs this immediately. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Then he made his mistake. In his rush, Alden sent me a document that should have gone to my ex's lawyer. It was a statement for the court, claiming I'd agreed to certain financial terms. At the bottom was a signature line, and there, already signed, was Alden's own name approving the false statement. I saved 3 copies of that email in 3 different places. Sophia was a paralegal in Alden's office, young and quiet. I'd noticed her during meetings, the way she watched Alden with something that looked like distrust. One day, as I left Alden's office, she followed me to the elevator. The doors closed, leaving us alone. Sophia pulled a folded note from her pocket and pressed it into my hand. Before I could speak, she whispered, "You're not crazy. He's dirty. I've been watching." The note had a phone number and a single sentence. "Call me from a phone he doesn't know about." I bought a prepaid cell phone that afternoon and called Sophia from a park bench. She answered on the first ring. "I don't have much time," she said, "but I've been copying files, timestamps of when he meets your ex-husband, email threads he thought he deleted. He's been doing this for years, targeting vulnerable clients." "Why are you helping me?" "Because my sister went through something similar with a different lawyer. She lost everything and nobody believed her. I won't let it happen again." We met twice more over the next week. Sophia brought printouts, careful records she'd been keeping. Then she found something bigger. Harper, there's an offshore account. Small deposits, always right after his divorce cases settle. I traced one back to your ex-husband's business account. My ex showed up at my house unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I watched him through the window, that familiar swagger as he walked up my driveway. The driveway to my house, the house he was trying to steal. I opened the door before he could knock. "You look tired," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Alden says you're finally seeing reason. The court date's set for next month. This'll all be over soon." "I suppose it will," I replied calmly. He studied my face, looking for cracks for fear. "You know, if you'd just been reasonable from the start, this could have been easy." "You're right," I said. "I should have been smarter." Something in my tone made him pause, but he was too arrogant to really hear the warning. He left a minute later, satisfied that victory was close. I locked the door behind him and walked to my home office. There, organized in a folder labeled recordings, was every piece of evidence I'd collected. Hours of audio, photographs of documents, bank records Sophia had copied, timestamps of secret meetings. I opened my laptop and began typing an email. It was time. I submitted a portion of the evidence to the court anonymously, just enough to raise questions. Not enough to show my full hand, but enough to make them panic. The next morning, Alden's office called me 3 times before 9 a.m. I didn't answer. By noon, my ex had left 6 voicemails, his voice progressing from confused to angry to something that sounded like fear. That evening, I received an email from Alden with the subject line, "Urgent." The message was short. "We need to talk immediately. There's been a development with the case. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" I waited 2 hours before responding, letting him sweat. "I can meet Thursday afternoon." Tomorrow would be better. Thursday is what I have available. I could almost feel his frustration through the screen, but he agreed. Thursday at 2 p.m. Sophia texted me that night from a number I didn't recognize. "He's losing it. Spent all day on the phone with your ex. They think someone's betraying them. They don't suspect you." Good. Let them tear each other apart from the inside. Thursday afternoon, I walked into Alden's office with my purse and a calm expression. He closed the blinds immediately, something he'd never done before. His hands shook slightly. "Harper, we have a situation," he started. "Someone's been making accusations, filing complaints. Completely baseless, but we need to address them together." "What kind of accusations?" "That I've been..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Improperly coordinating with your ex-husband. It's absurd, of course, but these things can damage reputations." "That does sound serious," I said quietly. "We can still fix this, both of us. If we present a united front, say there's been a misunderstanding." He leaned forward. "I can still get you something in the settlement, money, more than you'd get fighting. Just drop whatever was filed and we all move forward." I reached into my purse slowly. His eyes followed my hand, probably expecting tears or a tissue. Instead, I pulled out my voice recorder and pressed play. His own voice filled the room. "Don't worry, once the transfer goes through, he'll compensate me for my time." The color drained from Alden's face. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. I stopped the recording halfway through. "I have 17 hours of recordings. Would you like to hear more?" Alden stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "Harper, listen. You don't understand how these things work. I was just trying to make the process smoother for everyone. By conspiring with my ex-husband to steal my house." Conspiring is a strong word. He was sweating now, actual beads of perspiration on his forehead. "Look, we can work this out. I can get you money, real money, enough to buy another house, a better one. Just don't submit those recordings." I stood up, slinging my purse over my shoulder. "Mr. Alden, I'm not for sale. My house isn't for sale, and my integrity certainly isn't for sale." "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice hardening. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections. I can make your life very difficult." You already did, I replied. The difference is now I have proof. I walked toward the door. He called after me. Those recordings are illegal. You can't use them in court. I turned back with a small smile. Georgia is a one-party consent state, Mr. Alden. I know you're aware of that, given your profession. Every recording I made is completely legal. His face went from red to white. I left his office and walked straight to my car. Once inside, I opened my laptop and sent every single audio file to Sophia's secure email address. Then I sent copies to 3 other locations, including a cloud storage account and my new attorney. My phone rang within minutes. It was my ex, furious. What do you think you're doing? Alden called me. If you think you can blackmail us. I'm not blackmailing anyone, I interrupted. I'm simply making sure the truth comes out. This isn't over, he hissed. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. Sophia worked faster than I'd expected. Within 2 days, she'd compiled everything into a formal complaint and submitted it to the State Bar Ethics Board. My name appeared nowhere on the submission. To anyone reviewing it, it looked like an internal whistleblower report from someone at the firm. The Ethics Board moved quickly once they saw the evidence. They scheduled an immediate preliminary hearing. Meanwhile, my ex was unraveling. I knew because our mutual friends started calling me, awkward conversations where they admitted he'd been lying about me. He seemed so convincing, one friend said. But now with the news about his lawyer, we're wondering what else he lied about. One evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. You think this is over, my ex shouted. No greeting, no preamble. You think you've won? I'll drag this out for years. I'll make sure you spend every penny you have fighting me. That's interesting, I said calmly. Given that your lawyer is about to be disbarred and you're about to be investigated for fraud. You can't prove anything. I have 17 hours of recordings that say otherwise. Would you like to hear them? I paused. Actually, you'll hear them soon enough, in court. He hung up. I saved the call log anyway. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations when I arrived with my new attorney, a woman named Patricia Reeves who specialized in legal malpractice. She was expensive, but after reviewing my evidence, she'd agreed to take the case with payment deferred until after we won. We're going to destroy them, she'd told me during our first meeting. This is the most clear-cut case of attorney misconduct I've seen in 20 years. Alden sat on the other side of the courtroom, his expensive suit looking somehow shabby now. My ex wasn't even present. His attorney had advised him to stay away given the ethics investigation. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She reviewed the preliminary documents in silence while we all waited. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Alden, I've reviewed the complaint filed against you. I've also been made aware of certain recordings. Before we proceed, I want to make something clear. This court takes attorney ethics violations extremely seriously. Alden stood. Your Honor, those recordings were taken without my knowledge. In a one-party consent state, the judge interrupted. I'm aware. The recordings are admissible. She glanced at her notes. We'll reconvene in 3 days once I've had time to review all the evidence. Until then, Mr. Alden, you're to have no contact with any parties involved in this case. 3 days later, we returned to court. This time, the gallery was fuller. Word had spread about the case, and several other attorneys had shown up to watch, along with a reporter from the local legal journal. The judge didn't waste time. We're going to listen to portions of the recordings submitted as evidence. I want everyone to hear exactly what was said. Patricia stood and set up a small speaker system. The first recording began to play. Alden's voice filled the courtroom, smooth and confident. She's easy to steer. The emotional ones always are. Then my ex-husband's voice. Think she'll sign over the house. Alden, by next week. I've been pushing the joint ownership angle. Once she signs that, we're set. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I kept my eyes forward, hands folded in my lap. The recordings continued. 15 minutes of damning evidence, conversations where Alden and my ex discussed strategy, talked about splitting proceeds from selling my house, laughed about how trusting I was. When it ended, the silence was deafening. My ex-husband, who'd shown up despite his attorney's advice, had his face buried in his hands. Alden stared at the table in front of him, his face completely blank. The judge removed her glasses. "Mr. Alden, I'm ordering an immediate ethics investigation. This hearing will continue after that investigation concludes." The fallout was swift and brutal. Within a week, Alden's law firm issued a statement announcing his suspension pending the ethics board's final decision. 3 of his major clients withdrew their cases. The firm's website removed his photo and bio. My ex-husband's company somehow learned about his involvement in the scheme. The details were murky, but Sophia told me later that she'd made sure the right people saw the right information. He was terminated for conduct unbecoming and misuse of company resources. Apparently, he'd been using his work computer to email Alden, and it had records of everything. I received a formal letter from the State Bar Association. It was brief but meaningful. "We apologize for the conduct of a member of our bar. This behavior does not reflect the standards we hold attorneys to, and appropriate action is being taken." Patricia called me with updates almost daily. "This is bigger than just your case now," she explained. "The bar is investigating Alden's last 5 years of cases. They're finding a pattern." "How many others?" I asked. "At least 6 that they've confirmed so far, all divorce cases, all vulnerable clients." She paused. "You're probably the first one who fought back." That night I sat in my grandmother's house, the house I'd almost lost, and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief so profound it hurt. Patricia filed a countersuit against both Alden and my ex-husband. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, emotional distress, and 6 other charges I could barely understand. The legal language was dense, but the basic message was clear. They were going to pay. "We're asking for 3 times your legal fees, the cost of your grandmother's house if it had been sold, emotional damages, and punitive damages," Patricia explained as we reviewed the filing. "Plus, we're requesting a judgment that the house remains entirely yours with no claims from your ex-husband." "What are the chances we win?" I asked. Patricia smiled. It was the kind of smile a chess player makes when they see checkmate coming. "Given your evidence, 100%. The only question is how much they'll settle for." Within 2 weeks, we received a call from Alden's attorney. Not Alden himself. He'd been advised not to contact us directly. They wanted to discuss settlement options. "They want to settle quietly," Patricia told me. "Keep it out of the papers. Minimize damage to whatever reputation Alden has left." "What do you think?" "I think we should make them sweat a little longer," she grinned. "But ultimately, it's your choice." I thought about my grandmother, who'd bought this house in 1975 with money she'd saved for 30 years. I thought about how close I'd come to losing it. "No settlement," I said. "I want this on record. I want everyone to know what they did." The trial lasted 3 days. My recordings were entered as evidence, all 17 hours of them, though they only played the most damning portions. Patricia was methodical, walking the jury through each conversation, each lie, each moment of collusion. Alden's defense was weak and getting weaker. His attorney tried to argue that he'd been trying to help me, that his relationship with my ex-husband was just effective negotiation. The jury wasn't buying it. On the final day, I took the stand. Patricia asked me simple questions. When had I started recording? Why? What had made me suspicious? I answered each one calmly, sticking to facts. No dramatics, no tears, just the truth. "Ms. Harper," Patricia asked, "when you discovered your lawyer was working against you, why didn't you fire him immediately?" "Because I needed to know how deep it went," I replied. "If I'd just fired him, they would have found another way. I needed proof." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Alden's law license was revoked permanently. My ex-husband was ordered to forfeit any and all claims to my house and pay my complete legal costs, plus damages. The final settlement was more than I'd expected, enough to renovate the house and put away savings for the future. Outside the courthouse, Patricia shook my hand. You know what made the difference? You documented everything. You stayed calm. You were smarter than both of them combined. I looked back at the courthouse doors. I just wanted my house back. You got a lot more than that, Patricia said. You got justice. Returning to my house felt different after everything. I hired painters and chose colors my grandmother would have loved, soft yellows and blues. I hung new artwork, photographs of my family going back generations. Every room felt like mine again, truly mine, in a way it hadn't even before the divorce. One afternoon, while cleaning out old mail, I found something wedged under the living room rug. Alden's business card, probably dropped during one of his early visits when he was still pretending to be on my side. I picked it up and studied it for a moment. Alden and Associates, attorney at law, professional, trustworthy, a complete lie. I walked to the kitchen and threw it in the trash, then took the trash out immediately. I didn't want it in my house for even one more minute. Sophia called me that evening. She'd left Alden's firm and found a new position at a women's legal aid clinic. I'm helping people who have been taken advantage of by lawyers, she told me. Your case inspired me. I'm glad something good came from all this, I said. Harper, you should know. The ethics board used your case as a training example. They're teaching new attorneys about what not to do, she laughed. You're famous in legal ethics circles. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted my life back, but I supposed this was better than the alternative. 3 months after the trial ended, I was working in my garden when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Disbarred attorney and former executive exposed in property fraud scheme. The article detailed everything: Alden's pattern of targeting divorce clients, my ex-husband's involvement, the recordings that had brought them down. They didn't use my name, respecting my request for privacy, but anyone who knew the case would recognize it. I sat on my porch steps and read the entire article. The comments section was full of people sharing their own stories about corrupt lawyers, about divorces that had destroyed them. One comment stood out. This gives me hope that the system can work if you document everything. That evening, my phone lit up with messages from people I'd never met. Friends of friends who'd heard my story. A woman going through her own divorce, asking for advice. A man who'd been defrauded by his attorney years ago, saying my case had inspired him to file a complaint. I responded to each message carefully, offering what help I could. Mostly, I told them the same thing: document everything, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone make you feel crazy for being suspicious. My grandmother used to say that the best revenge is living well. She was right, but I'd learned something else too. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply making sure the truth comes out. 6 months after everything ended, I was invited to speak at a local legal reform panel. They wanted someone who'd been through the system, who'd fought and won. I almost said no, but something made me accept. The community center was small, maybe 50 people in the audience. I stood at the podium and looked out at their faces, people who'd been hurt by the very system meant to protect them. Justice isn't loud, I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the room. It's not dramatic or quick. It's patient. It's methodical. It's about documenting every conversation, keeping every receipt, trusting your instincts even when people tell you you're wrong. I told them my story, leaving out names but including every lesson I'd learned. Write everything down. Keep backups. Don't confront until you have overwhelming proof. Trust, but verify everything. After the talk, people came up to share their own stories. So many stories. I listened to each one, offered advice where I could, and connected people with resources. Walking home afterward, I passed Alden's old office building. The lights were off, windows dark. His firm had moved to a smaller location across town, their reputation damaged but still operating. Alden himself had disappeared from public view entirely. I didn't feel triumph looking at that dark building, just a quiet satisfaction that I'd protected myself and my grandmother's legacy. They'd thought I was naive, easy to manipulate, someone who'd roll over and accept whatever they decided. They were wrong. I was just patient. And patient people pay attention. They see patterns. They gather evidence. They wait for exactly the right moment to act. As I walked up my driveway, past the garden my grandmother had planted 50 years ago, past the porch where she'd taught me to trust myself, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. My house, my life, my truth. They'd tried to take it all, and they'd failed completely. I unlocked my front door, stepped inside, and closed it firmly behind me. Home,